You know, there are all kinds of claims about Israel and the Jewish people. And of course, where we go to address the claims is super important. We can go to the world sources, or we can go to God's source, which is the Bible. There's a particular claim among the many that I wanted to address very briefly this morning. And that's the claim that God's promises to Israel are not valid since most of Israel is in unbelief. Okay, this is a pretty prevalent claim. It's taught by many, it's believed by many, without really asking that question of the scriptures and then deriving an answer from the text. You know, life is theology lived out. And theology is like dominoes. If we begin with the wrong belief or presupposition about a particular subject, any theological subject really, then the rest of our theology is affected just like dominoes. Now, our theology, whether good or bad, is then carried out through action. Wrong theology produces bad fruit. Proper theology produces good fruit. Now, as I mentioned, there are several basic beliefs about Israel in the Bible which are very important, and also about the church, which are very important. And if we get either of those two entities wrong, either Israel or the church, we will both then believe and end up walking in error. Now, when it comes to the beliefs about Israel, perhaps the most important belief among many that affects the rest of our theological dominoes is this: God chose Israel based on his own faithfulness and sovereignty, not based on Israel's merit, not based on Israel's behavior. This is evidenced all throughout the scriptures, but especially in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 7 and 8, where God explicitly says, Israel, I've not chosen you because you were the greatest of all peoples or anything like that. I've chosen you because I love you and because I'm faithful to the oath that I swore to your fathers. That never changes all throughout Scripture. Even if God is going to discipline Israel and exile them from the land, or discipline them by bringing in an outside army and so forth, it never changes the fact that Israel is chosen. And that's why Paul in Romans chapter 11 tells us that God's promises are irrevocable, right? Because they're not based on Israel's behavior. And this is a crucial understanding of Israel that we must have from Genesis to Revelation. And the error is this, the danger is this. If we begin with the belief or the presupposition that God elected the Jewish people because of merit or because of behavior, then it is very easy to fall prey to the false idea that God has unelected or abandoned or cut off Israel or fulfilled in some way, which just means the end of Israel. And it is so easy to believe that God is done with Israel because of their lack of belief, or because of their lack of merit, or because of their lack of good behavior. See, so if we believe that God chose Israel because of his own choice and love, and he's going to be faithful to the promises to the forefathers, then we understand that there's a connection between God and Israel that'll never be broken. But if we begin with the wrong presupposition that God chose Israel because they were so good, or because Israel was behaving so well, then it's really easy to believe that God has abandoned them for the same reason. Now, this is why this concept of Israel being chosen because of God's glory, not because of Israel's merit, is why in Romans chapter 11, Paul can state two items as being true at the same time. Number one, Paul says that Israel is currently experiencing a hardening, a partial hardening. Indeed, he says that most of Israel is in unbelief. And at the very same time, he writes that God's promises to Israel are irrevocable. How can these things be true at the same time? Well, it's because those promises were never dependent upon Israel's behavior. They were always dependent upon God's faithfulness. And this is the crucial thing to grasp in this discussion. Some may be tempted to believe that the discussion about Israel is just ultimately an eschatology, it's an eschatology subject, it's an eschatological question, and those things will just work themselves out in the end. But Israel is far more than a topic of eschatology. Yes, it's certainly a topic within eschatology, but it is a topic for right now as well. There is a present population of Jewish people. There is a present rebirth state of Israel. And it is a theological topic that the Bible addresses time and time and time again. Israel is mentioned around 2,400 times in the Bible. So it's probably a topic we might want to be familiar with. So because the promises of God were never based on Israel's belief or good behavior, they're based on God's faithfulness. That's why Paul can write that their promises are irrevocable. And again, just to repeat, if we begin with the wrong domino, if we begin with the wrong belief that God chose Israel because of behavior or something else other than his faithfulness, then we will end up falling prey to the belief that God has abandoned Israel. And so God is faithful. And that's why the discussion about Israel is far more about some matter of eschatology, but it's about the very character of God. If God has abandoned unconditional promises to the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, how do we know he's not going to abandon promises to the church as an entity? How do we know he's not going to abandon promises to individuals for salvation? You can't have it both ways. You can't have it be that God is not faithful to Israel, and yet he's going to be faithful to the church. And you also can't mix up and call the church Israel, because as we just mentioned, Paul says explicitly in Romans chapter 11 that Israel are considered enemies of the gospel, right? They're not enemies of Christians. Those within Israel who don't believe are enemies of the gospel. That's what Paul says. He also says that Israel has a partial hardening over them. These are not descriptors of the church. And so we can't say that God has abandoned Israel and yet he'll remain faithful to me. And we can't say that the church is Israel and Israel is the church. And yet read Romans 11 without misconstruing the plain meaning. So that's it for this morning. God is faithful. He has attached his faithful character to the people and nation of Israel. That will not be broken, nor will the people's connection to the God of Israel be broken. That remains the same. So for all the people who want to detach the God of Israel from the people of Israel, it's not going to work. They are attached by an unbreakable bond called the Scriptures.